Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. And as usual, I'm joined by Boston Ward. Hello, Boston.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. My head's still spinning. It's early in the week. News has been coming at us like a washing machine on spin cycle that can't seem to get to the finish. And I think it's just going to get more rapid as it goes, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would hope at some point that somebody would, unplug the washing machine and let things slow down and make sure that it's still operating and give it a chance to catch up. But
you're talking about go to soap cycle, right?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what all the settings are, but you gotta open up the lid and let it stop for a second.
I'm going to tell Allison when you just said that because obviously you've never used a washing machine before. You've been outed.
Well, I get in trouble when I use it. I guess it's because I don't know all the cycles, but it's at some point there has to be a resolution and not three different groups of people trying to make different decisions and impose it on the others. And
yeah,
I know that only one of them truly matters and has the deciding vote, but this the way that it has played out over the last 6 days has been hard to really wrap your mind around. And it's been so disjointed. And I really think that it's been a bad look for the Big Ten in a number of different ways. And there might be lasting repercussions for that, but we'll have a lot more opportunity to dive into that. But it's been hard to keep up with exactly what they're doing because they take 2 or 3 or 4 steps forward and then 10 back. It's not a 2 or 1 deal, to borrow that cliche. They were going – last week felt like full steam ahead until Saturday and then a screeching halt.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to talk about that as soon as we get back from my conversation with my special guest this week. A fellow some Ohio State fans I think have heard of and still remember, Rex Kern, quarterback of the 1968 National Championship team, part of that super soft group that went on to have 3 spectacular, could have been even bigger years, as it turns out. But, I just kind of want to lean on him because he keeps up with what's going on in the college football world. Huge still Ohio State fan, et cetera. And just want to get his take on the way he's eyeballing this from like his confines there near Denver, Colorado, because, this is mind-boggling. As you and I talk right now, it's Monday afternoon. By Tuesday of this week, we fully expect probably. There's an oxymoron, but we fully expect probably to learn what the Big Ten is going to do for the fall, or whether it's going to kick the can down the road a little bit more and maybe delay like Ryan Day wants them to do, or whether they're just going to pull the plug on the season and then what. But we're going to get to that when you and I come back, the then what part. But folks, just sit back and enjoy this conversation I had with Rex Kern, and I'll be back in just a few minutes with Boston Ward. As promised, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back with a blast from the past. A big-time blast from the past. Rex Kern, thanks for joining the Tim May Podcast.
Thanks, Tim. Great to be with you.
Dude, summarize your thoughts right now. It looks like the college football season is probably not going to happen as you and I record this podcast. Stranger things have happened, but just what are your thoughts right now? As now what I'd call a glorified fan sitting out there, and where you're in Colorado, if I'm correct on that. But just what's your take on what's been going on, man?
Boy, it's a completely different world today, Tim. With what has all been going on, you and I were talking off camera earlier, that reflects back to 1968 and what all we had going on our campus at Kent State, the riots, and a totally different situation because this coronavirus is really scary. And, we see what's happened in Major League Baseball and teams coming in, different locker rooms, trying to keep everybody safe and healthy. We just came back to Denver because we also summer up in a big metropolis in Ennis, Montana,
There you
which houses about 400 full-time residents. And I couldn't believe by evening we turned the news on, and all of a sudden COVID had increased, and in that small little area we were just in a cocoon. And so coming back to Denver has not been too bad, because people here are social distancing, but wearing masks, and and quite frankly, Tim, when I went from a college quarterback to a defensive back, I got to play with some defensive guys that were, not real happy campers whenever somebody had come, like Bubba Smith or Ted Hendricks or Mike Curtis. And in pileups, I'm telling you what, those guys would probably bite you or spit at you. And, with the COVID, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think what our ADs and commissioner are trying to think is, how do we keep our kids safe, but how do we play in an environment like this? And it is really going to be quite challenging to see a season go forward in the fall, but at the same time, boy, that sure leaves a whole bunch of Buckeye fans and college football fans sitting on the sidelines, and it's just a new, different world that we have.
Yeah. It's crazy because, people want to look at this in all kinds of different ways. And one of which is, one of the prevailing opinions is that, if college football had pressed forward, it was going to be all about the money because they need the money. Well, obviously they do. They count on that income, from television revenue, et cetera, from the football season. But like you just touched on, college football is much more than a revenue generating sport and much more than just an athletic endeavor. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are invested emotionally, et cetera, with their college football teams. Ohio State, probably the biggest group out there, and I think it's probably surpassed Notre Dame now in terms of just national scope, just from the alumni base. And Alabama, Texas, I grew up in Alabama and Texas before I moved to the great state of Ohio, and it was the same way down there. It's not, it's literally part of the way of life. So you understand as well as anybody the void this will leave, right?
Well, absolutely, Tim. And you really touch on it because let me give you a couple of stories. It was probably 20, 25 years ago, even longer than that. We had an opportunity to go to Switzerland. And so my family and I went over, and our boys were probably 8 and 10 years of age. And we're walking down the street in Zermatt, Switzerland area. And the boys are saying to me, they're following behind Nancy and I, and they go, "Hey, Dad, I think this guy across the street knows you." And I said, "Come on, let's go." I said, because at the end of the day, in this Zermatt city, they put goats down the street, and then they, clean up their mess behind them. And so we were on the opposite side, Tim. And then this gentleman and his wife, they were, I had to be about 25 or 30 because they were about 50 at that time. And they said, "Excuse me, you don't have to be Rex Kern, do you?" I said, "Depends whether you're from that school up north or if you're a Buckeye." And he said, "Oh, no, we're Buckeyes." He said, "You know what? My wife and I, all we do is travel and go to Ohio State football games. And we do have our alumni that we follow all over the world and find people all over the world." Yeah. So, and the cohesiveness of that is like your foundation in this conversation is that's college football. And
Yeah.
college football has grown to be, you were saying hundreds of thousands, but it's millions and millions of people. And where we live here in the Denver area now, unfortunately, we got a guy down the street from us who went to that school up in Ann Arbor. And, we have a lot of fun here in the neighborhood. And they tell me they don't want to see that Buckeye flag flying. And then I've got another guy that's down the street that he's from Maryland. I said, well, you guys are step kids. You just came in late to the Big Ten. And the breadth and the depth of college football is just quite astounding.
Rex, what do you think about the conspiracy that maybe this is going on because Michigan doesn't want to play Ohio State again?
That's what I said. My friend the other day from that school up north. I said, "Hey, I'll be careful here," but I said, "You know how we felt. You got our Cooper up there."
There you go. Hey, John Cooper, he knows I'm a good guy, though. You know that, man. 2-10-1. But he can't escape that.
Yeah, John's a great guy. John really is a super person and did a lot of great things for us at Ohio State.
Yeah,
except the big one.
Yeah, I was going to say. But, they're, 2-17 over the last 19 years. So they've surpassed that 2-10-1 mark almost twice. Hey, I wanted to get you on this, though. I mean, back in '68, you were a rising sophomore. You were part of the Super Softs and stuff. But there was all this other stuff going on, like we touched on. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy assassinated that year. The race riots that followed, a lot of those things. The Vietnam War was at its height. That was, I think, the deadliest year for American troops over there. I think 16,000 American troops were killed over there in that one year, if I'm not mistaken. It was crazy times going on. How did you guys cocoon or kind of keep it together? I mean, I would think it's probably reminiscent about the way this team has kind of kept its focus despite everything that's going on. But go ahead.
Well, Tim, it all starts at the top. I've had the opportunity to meet our head coach currently, Brian Day, and what a terrific person he is. And he's a great asset to our university, and especially to our program. But WWA's was a military guy, and he brought us all together. And Tim, he just kind of you used a pretty good word. We were in a cocoon. He kept us close together. He wanted us to stay off the oval, not get involved. We had more important things to do, and he wanted to keep us as one unit. And that's basically what we did. We were focused, and of course we could isolate because we were off campus over at the Ernie Biggs facility. Yeah. And so it was just trying to go to class and get your grades. Let's come play football. And we were just totally focused in on those priorities.
Did y'all were a super talented team, obviously, you guys, Stillwagon, all you guys, Tatum, all you guys. But did it help y'all even? Do you think the distractions helped y'all focus more that year, if you follow my drift? I mean, to go unbeaten, obviously, win the Rose Bowl and win the national championship. In some ways, did that help sort of heighten the focus?
That's pretty interesting evaluation, Tim. I would think so, because that way we probably hyper-focused on what our task was. And, each week it was, who do we play? And then at the end of practice, we would practice a little bit for those guys up north. And then, it was pretty good. In fact, Woody being a great strategist, he pulled in one of our centers, Jim Conroy, and called him on the phone one morning. And here's a great story that Jim tells. I love it. Every time we have our reunion, I say, you got to tell me that story again. So he says the old man calls him and he goes, Jim, I want you over to my office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And he goes, oh boy, what'd I do? I've been going to class. I haven't skipped anything. Been going to the study table. Okay. So he gets over Woody's office, and Woody's got a stack of books about this high. And Jim sits down and he goes, now, Jim, I want you to take these books and I want you to read these, because that's what these rioters are thinking about, and this is what their theory is. And you report back to me every day at 2 o'clock, and you're going to be my spy over on campus.
Wow.
And so the old man wanted to keep touch. Now he would go at the Oval, and he would speak over there at times, but he didn't really want us around there much at all.
Yeah. Crazy. Put yourself in these players' shoes now, though, Rex. They've dedicated themselves. I know you're keeping up with stuff. Our reports from LettermenRow.com and other places. Just how focused they were on getting this season in, determined they are. Even their parents are speaking up about it and stuff. But what would be your words of wisdom to them now, from the standpoint of it looking like the season is probably not going to happen? What would be your words of wisdom to them?
Boy, Tim, I haven't given a great deal of thought to that. Off the cuff, I would probably say, since it is so new, and since college football has been completely different than when we played, because
I was going to get to that.
I'm a firm believer in first and foremost, when I was recruited to come to Ohio State. In fact, Fred Taylor started recruiting me long before Woody did. And all that Fred and Woody talked about was, you'll come to Ohio State, and first and foremost, you'll graduate from our university. Well, we don't see that we still hope our kids graduate, but they're not here for 4 or 5 years any longer. Mm-hmm. And if we're not recruiting the best athletes in the country, they're only going to be here like a junior college. Mm-hmm. They're going to be here 2 years and gone. And so hopefully, like we've done at Ohio State, we've set up where these kids who leave early can come back, and we do have scholarships available for them, which we participate in. And so, it's a whole different world, And then on top of that, because of that, you've got these young kids who are so talented. Are they going to come out after their sophomore year? And if that's the case, we've got kids on this team right now, or young men, that say, well, if we play in spring, if I get hurt, am I a Joe Burrow, or do I drop to 3rd or 4th round?
Yeah.
So
Joe Burrow or Joe Zero. Yeah.
And not many zeros behind the name.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So that's really a tough call, Tim. And I really don't know what the kid's choice will be. You hope it's the right one for them in their situation. But, for us, I will guarantee any of those athletes that they will have a greater future if they get their college degree, because there has been proven studies that over a lifetime, they are going to earn more income with that degree than even a big NFL contract. Mm-hmm. That's just my position on that, and doggone it, I'm sticking to it.
NFL stands for not for long for most guys, if at all.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to ask you this. We're talking about the masses, the millions of people who follow Ohio State football. And, the thing, the debate, it's not really a debate. Debate's really reached a head about, whether these guys should share much more of the pie that's developed by basically media rights, et cetera. And, at one point, you were thought a serious candidate for the athletic directorship at Ohio State. And I think they missed the bucket there at one point when they didn't go with you. But that's another conversation for another day. But where do you stand on players sharing more of the, for want of another term, the profits that they help generate and help sustain the Ohio State athletic program?
Well, again, I go back to the altruistic approach, but today the mentality and the image of what is going on in college football in particular is that there's a great deal of money that is generated, and rightfully so. But of course, as we break that down, we look at, okay, how much money does it cost to house and feed and educate, the total athletic program? And like at Ohio State University, we have one of the largest sports program, intercollegiate sports program of all the competitive colleges. And by golly, it takes a lot of money to run those. Hey, Jim, when we played, I think we got a Sunday night meal stipend, $12-15, maybe it was that much. Wow. Hey, we'd go down and we'd get a sub sandwich and buy my girlfriend one. And hey, we were seventh heaven, know. And so we were all happy. And Tim, I hate to bring this up, but my dear friend Rod Masajowski, he goes, "Hey Rex, you know what? You remember when Chick Harley would come into our locker room? That's us now. When we go in the Ohio State locker room, hey." Those guys look at us and go, "You played here?" No, but you had to be the manager on the team. Well, we kind of set the standard, guys. But Tim, I think there has to be some kind of compromise, like in most anything. And I think our athletic director, Dean Smith, is doing a great job in helping guide us in the Big Ten through that. And, I think the kids should have some, but then all of a sudden, you kind of feel from a holistic view that, okay, now are they really amateurs, or are they is this a more austere view of the NFL farm clubs?
Yeah.
So I think we'll always chase that tail around the dog and figure it out, though. I think it's too big and it's too popular and it's too important to way too many people. Or no, the amount of people, but it's important.
Well, as I've talked to people too, once you get to pure paying players, then you're talking about contract situations. You're talking about third parties getting involved. Even with the name, image, and likeness thing that they're trying to get some handle on and pass for these fellas, you're going to have somebody supervising your situation. But the flip side of it is, as one person highly involved in college football told me, well, you know what? When you get into a contract situation or you're signing players, and let's say second year they're not panning out, you really, what's your obligation to them? And then what's their obligation to you? Or are they obligated to you for 4 years, for example? You're not. Or is this just going to be a stepping stone always to the NFL? Now, the other thing I want to say, I want to talk about you real quick, Rex, is though, I really do believe the players should share a little bit more of the pie. But the flip side of the pie is if you took this collection of most players on college campuses and put them over in Columbus Crew Stadium and put a different uniform on them, okay, and had a league of those guys playing guys like Alabama with a different kind of uniform on. I'm talking about the players.
Yeah.
What makes college football different is the fact of the millions that follow it based on their fandom for their particular teams, et cetera. I think the XFL has shown you can have some quality football players, but people still not show up to watch it, you know? So
Yeah.
a major part of the attraction and the money generating aspect of things is the fact you've got Ohio State on your uniform. Flip side of it is you got to have Rex Kerns and Jim Stillwagons and Justin Fields and Wyatt Davises to keep that going, right? So
Absolutely.
there's that middle ground you got to get to, right?
Yeah, there is. And then, Tim, do you get into the situation which would break the whole team concept? Does a running back or a quarterback say, no, wait a minute, I'm worth a little bit more. And I guarantee you, no football team would ever survive with that kind of mentality, because we are far better as a team than we are individually. And I'll tell you what, I saw that time and time again, in our program, and what we saw, it was every guy was for one another. It was not a look at me, it is look at us.
Yeah.
And if we start becoming individuals, then the whole system would break down, and we don't want that.
Yeah. I was going to say, the way I sum it up, college football coaching was meant to be a career for people. College football playing was not meant to be a career. There are time limits. So I just think imagine being Gene Smith right now, man. You're juggling all this
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, I know.
Right?
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Rex, it's always a slice every time I talk to you, my man. I hope you're staying healthy. Are you staying healthy?
I am, Tim. I am. I'm very healthy. Feeling the best I've felt in probably 50 years, after about 15 surgeries, 7 back surgeries, 2 total hip replacements, shoulder surgeries, hand surgeries, ear surgeries. Man, hey, it's brutal, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I better talk to my backside tackle, hadn't I?
I was going to say, man, you're a walking, talking example. Sometimes you sacrifice short term, right, to have some short term benefits. But real quick, though, I've asked guys, as you look back, was it worth it?
Yes, every bit. Every bit. For me, Tim, and I think my class and the guys I played with, that was the only way we were going to get a college education. And fortunately, Tim, I wasn't very smart, so I had to go back 3 times and get 3 degrees from Ohio State University. And, in fact, before, I did a longitudinal study on Woody Hayes for his first year at Ohio State, and found that 87% of Woody's varsity football players graduated, and another 37% went on to graduate or professional school.
Wow.
So that speaks volumes.
Yeah, y'all left your mark. Hey, let me ask you one last thing before we get out of here. If, in fact, we don't get to see Justin Fields play this year, and possibly not, because you would think he'd be one of those guys like Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, be thinking heavily about the NFL and moving on. Well, what are fans going to miss? I would think you, as a former quarterback, just number one, we're probably pretty amazed as the year went on last year the way he developed, but we're probably looking very much forward to what you were going to see this year.
Yes, because I think with Joe Burrow going to the Cincinnati Bengals, the hard part is if you're so good at that position, you normally go to the worst NFL team by record. And so you're thrown into the fire pretty quick. And I still remember when I went to Baltimore. Of course, I went as a defensive back because they had a guy by the name of John Unitas and Earl Morrill that backed them up. And Bubba Smith was challenging all of our running backs to a 40-yard dash. And Bubba said, here's $100. Anybody can beat me, take it. Nobody could beat him. Nobody would take him on. And I'm thinking, this guy is 6'8", 285, not an ounce of fat on him. Yeah. And I don't believe we played against anybody in college that big, that fast. And so with these young kids coming out, I think Justin would do exceptionally well to get another year of seasoning under him and grow and maturation from the body standpoint as well to get a little bigger and stronger in certain areas. And all that's a maturation process, as well as the dynamics of seeing different defenses, different coverages. And I'll tell you what, Tim, I was really fortunate in my short NFL career. I had the opportunity to play in several playoff games. And when you get to the playoffs, it is nanoseconds. I'm telling you what, you see that stuff, and all of a sudden you think Paul Warfield is a 5-second 40-yard dash. All of a sudden he runs by you and you go, shoot, where'd that guy go? You know? Yeah. And so things happen really fast and really quick, and you just don't really get those dynamics fully until you get up to the NFL.
Yeah. But watching Justin Fields last year, though, is it amazing how far the quarterback position has evolved? I mean, what just stands out about that player in particular?
Oh, I think
remember, he's 6'3", 225, you know?
Oh, yeah. I was like 5'11", 173.
Yeah.
Okay. There's just a little bit of difference. Okay. There was so much progress in his whole mannerism. But I would say the biggest thing that separated him last year was his poise and his timing and being able to read the defense and knowing where his receivers are going to be.
Yeah.
He just, you could just see that he was carrying himself in a different way, and he was in command of the offense, and his teammates were thriving off of him.
Yeah. Rex, slice of life, man. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming on the Tim May podcast, my man.
Okay, thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a moment with my good buddy Austin Ward. You know, Boston, as Rex pointed out in that interview, and I pointed it out to him too. College football, everybody wants to talk about, you know, the safety for the players, which is paramount in this thing. I think it's been at the forefront in the mind of Gene Smith, Ryan Day all along as they've tried to prepare this team for this strange season. They want to talk about the money that's involved if, in fact, Ohio State and the Big Ten have to cancel or have canceled the season. But what he and I also talked about was the fact that college football is so ingrained in people's minds. I'm talking about millions, tens of millions of people live for that time of the year when they're rooting for their favorite team. So it's not just about the money involved. There will be a huge void if there isn't some form or fashion of college football played. And I think you agree with that.
I don't. There's no question about that. And the toll on this could be a mental for untold thousands of people. Physically, the only people that will be missing out would be that football team. But there is a heavy, heavy financial toll that would be paid for college campuses and communities that when university presidents are trying to protect tuition dollars and, the academia and the wide world of universities and colleges, it makes sense. I understand it's not lip service, but that's their direct bottom line. If every other business in their town, every restaurant, every T-shirt shop goes under, well, there are not going to be a lot of people signing up to go to your school in the first place. You can't just focus solely on protecting that academic side. The NCAA and the member institutions have kicked this particular can of amateurism down the road as far as it can go to save communities like Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Stillwater, Oklahoma, or Eugene, Oregon. You have to play football.
Mm-hmm.
You just do. And the repercussions of this, without exploring every possibility to play, man, it's almost unthinkable.
Yeah, but I just go back to the sweat equity that's been put in by the players involved and by the coaching staffs involved. Yeah, they want to play. It's just like if you work at a factory or you work at a convenience store or wherever you work and you haven't been able to work because of the COVID-19 situation, you're champing at the bit to get back to work, and obviously, this thing probably opened up way too more quickly than it should have. But the point was, it's no different for these guys. I mean, they want to do what they've been training their whole lives to do in coaching professions, like in some respects, 40, 50 years, Greg Madison, Larry Johnson, those guys, they want to, pursue their profession. Brian Hartline has said, he'll play anywhere. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically said Ohio State would play anybody, anywhere, anytime. I'm pretty much, as he reacted to the news on Monday, some of which was premature in terms of maybe the vote that was taken by a vote that was not taken by Big Ten presidents, which was reported to have been taken, but the idea that they've sort of agreed to pull the plug on the 2020 season. We'll see how that goes as this week goes along, if in fact that's announced. But as Ryan Day said later in the day, he's willing to look at other options if in fact the Big Ten does pull the plug. We'll see if his president and his athletic director are. I think there is sentiment for that, at least from Gene Smith's standpoint, because Gene Smith has been adamant all along. He wants to see the players who came back for this team, like a Wyatt Davis and a Josh Myers, Sean Wade. He wants to see them get to play what would be their last season in college football. They're not. I don't think anyone in the Big Ten, or at least in the Big Ten upper realm, definitely at Ohio State, I don't think anyone is that interested at all in discussing a spring season because it doesn't make sense in all kinds of ways. And you talk about kicking the can, that would really be kicking the can.
Yeah, a spring season is not an option for 10 reasons that I've listed on Lettermen Row before, and probably dozens more on top of that we haven't even got to. Ryan Day and Scott Frost, the Nebraska coach, both said the same thing. They play anywhere, and if it were up to them, they would be doing that and organizing games against Alabama and Clemson and Georgia and Texas and Oklahoma. Unfortunately,
Cincinnati says it's going to play. Go ahead now.
Yeah, but and if it were up to just Gene Smith, they would do that as well. The difficulty is the fact that Ohio State is locked into contracts with the Big Ten, and that they have a president who was part of that call on Sunday and standing in the way of them being able to play too. I know it's easy to blame all the other schools, but Ohio State's president is part of this. Until President-elect Christina Johnson is on board with them playing, you can't even begin to pursue the legal loopholes that you're going to have to when your media rights are owned by the Big Ten. That's a huge, huge, huge amount of money that we're talking about, and they're not going to let that go without a fight. So those are just, I said it earlier on Monday, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, and it's really, really fun to think about Ohio State playing in the SEC or playing Oklahoma and Texas in a regular season this year, but that's not going to be an outcome. There's just no way that could possibly be managed at this point. So what you need, and I said this when it felt so weird a couple weeks ago, you and I were talking about, the SEC and the Pac-12 are the teams that came up with the most, forward-thinking, reasonable schedule by pushing to September 26th.
Mhm.
Well, you still have that to work with. The thing I was most surprised about last week, and I guess we didn't have a chance to talk about this on your podcast then, was why on earth Ohio State and Illinois were scheduled for September 3rd.
Mhm.
Why on earth they were supposed to be playing Rutgers on September 12th when Rutgers will not be playing games in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season.
Right.
You just flushed away all that built-in flexibility that you were trying for, and they felt so good. They're patting themselves on the back for Jenga 41, and look how cool this is. You're not going to be playing until September 26th. These other leagues just told you that you need a month to prepare, and the fact that I can't get around
All right,
it.
here, yeah. Well, let's jump to the heart of the matter. That was just released last week. That schedule written in pencil, as I keep saying, with a big eraser on the end of it. One of those kind. Remember the one you would buy to put on the end of the pencil?
Yeah.
And
We got a 3-inch rubber eraser.
yeah. Keep it handy, especially me. Heck, I made mistakes even with pencil. I mean, even after I fixed it. But I digress. What do you think? What do you think drove this sudden? And it was sudden based on the sort of feel-good story of a week ago, not even a week ago, of the schedule. And this is tentative. We can still cancel the season. Kevin Warren was up front on that, the commissioner of the Big Ten. What suddenly made it all of a sudden on Sunday, over the weekend, but Saturday and Sunday, so suddenly acute that it had to be dealt with then and early this week? Like you said, the flexibility was built in here to kick the can. Instead, they decided to reach over and pull the plug, perhaps. Well, what do you think it's the idea of facing the possibility of a player, quote, union, end quote? What do you think is driving this bus off the road?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious your thoughts on this as well, because I think that this is speculation on my part. I don't know exactly what was discussed on Saturday night or Sunday night. And they are currently focusing heavily on, the cardiovascular
Right.
repercussions, and that's fine. But I think that that's a pretty weak scapegoat, honestly. And that might sound insensitive, but if it can be found with other cases of colds and other illnesses, look, if you asked every one of these players who are posting about we want a season, they know that they can break their necks playing this game.
Yeah.
Risk of COVID-19 and cardiovascular repercussions to them is not something that's going to be a deterrent to them playing. And if it is, that's why they have the option not to play.
Yeah.
So what has changed in the last week? I don't want to point to this specifically being we are united, we want a season, Pac-12 united, all of these organizational things.
We want to play.
But it is wildly coincidental that that's really the only thing that's materially changed, because a lot of these studies about the long-term impacts are they're not done, or the indications already existed before last week, certainly before last Wednesday.
Yeah.
When somebody signed off and said, you know what, Kevin Warren, it's okay, go ahead and release this schedule into the wild.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting is what you just said. And I brought it up with, I'm talking to people all the time, just like you are. And the thing about COVID-19 is you don't know where it's going to come from, where it's going to hit you. If you let these, suddenly you disband the football team for the year and you let them out in the general populace, they probably have much more of a chance of contracting it, or contacting and then contracting. A lot of actings there.
Yep.
But then, like I put forth with this person today, if somebody tests positive for it on your team, you put them aside, which Ohio State has already done before, and can isolate them. You contact tracing with them, see who else might be in jeopardy. You do the testing, but then that person may or may not be asymptomatic, may have tested positive, but may not be showing any signs, may get a few symptoms. But the point is, then you leave it up to that person and his family whether they want to continue playing football or not this fall, if in fact he comes back clean later. But you can still have long-lasting effects, and certain people have had these long-lasting effects from this thing, jeopardy that they face. Some haven't, many haven't. But then you put it, kind of like in their ballpark of whether they want to, quote unquote, risk coming back playing, knowing there could be long-term effects. But the point is, for anybody who gets COVID-19, there's the possibility of long-term effects, not just football players. It's not going to be exacerbated by football players playing each other. I mean, you follow my drift on that. It's kind of like a disease that anybody can get. So if you don't have players out there who have tested positive for it in the last 2 weeks who are playing, probably the chances are slight that they're going to contract it by playing the actual game. But the long-term effects of it are going to be there for anybody who does get it, possibly. So then you take, you put it up to them whether or not they want to come back and play. Because, like I said, you could just, this is going to affect people no matter who you are down the line, a lot of people down the line, and there's nothing to do about it whether you play football or not.
And I still don't believe we've seen definitively what Ohio State, the academic institution, is doing about on-campus learning, in-person learning. There's this notion out there that, teams are going to be sending players home if the season is canceled. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If they're still members of
if they're still school,
if they're still in your school and they're still going to be working out in your facility, and then are you going to have them have any in-person learning opportunities? There's also going to be risk of them when you have the student population that is going out to open restaurants, open bars, anything else that would be available to them on campus, potentially parties. We've all been in college before, and we know how it works. This idea, it's not that the safest place for the football players is in the football building.
Exactly.
And they're not making this up. That's the fact of the matter.
Dr. Corey Teague, Master Teague III's dad, I had him on a video that's for on lettermenrow.com that you can watch right now. And that's kind of what he talked about. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but the safest place for these guys now is the way they've set up things with the football program. I mean, they're not staying in a sequestered hotel or something somewhere. They're going back to their apartments, for example, and that's worked. You agree that's worked pretty well for them to this point.
Yeah, and it's not lip service to them that they're like, really doing this great job and cheerleading them on about it. I mean, it's right. All programs are this way.
Exactly.
They've gone to great lengths and great expense to try to play, again, because of what we talked about earlier, that the players want to, and the coaches want to, families want to, the local businesses need them to, all those reasons that we talked about, that everyone is going to great lengths to make this happen. And it's not fun for them. Ryan Day was talking about this last week with the workers, the hourly workers who need to, and the trainers and everybody else who works in the Woody. Basically, they're from sun up to sundown and sleeping for 4 or 5 hours to try and give guys an opportunity just to work out. Like this is hard work that they're putting into it. And you look at the amount of positive tests and the success rate. We don't know the exact number for Ohio State, but when they shut down, we know it was in the single digits for football. And you and I were told that every player was accounted for at the start of practice last week. So that would lead me to believe there were zero tests or contact tracing opportunities to knock them out. We know that's not everybody has been at zero. Michigan has been upfront about their totals.
Right.
We know where they stand and how they're managing that. But the most ludicrous part to me to get to this point is that they let them do these workouts for the last 2 months to prepare. Their players tested positive because they came back to campus to do them. And they at no point in the last 2 months did they say, did the NCAA, the Big Ten, say league-wide shut it down, right? I mean, that's initially the Big Ten had some stipulations and reservations. I get that. I'm not trying to go too far with that, but why did they let them do it?
Yeah,
not only did they put out a schedule, but they cleared them to start training camp on Thursday.
But as we all know, what they did in June and July is nothing like real football camp.
Of course.
And even so far, what they've done in preseason camp, the several days they've had a preseason camp is nowhere close to what real football is. But this is what's intriguing to me is so far you've had how many sports restart? You've had the NHL in their bubble, the NBA in their bubble, the MLS in their bubble. Major League Baseball's had some stumbles, but they're still playing. The whatever that's called, the Premier League, that thing all you hoity-toity people watch, they're still playing.
I don't get called that very often.
Yeah, I mean that's but like I've always said, football is the most congregational sport there is, where guys are up close with each other, meaning primarily linemen on every play that you don't have in any other sport except rugby. So there's that concern, but that concern's never really been voiced by the powers that be. That I've noticed that it was going to be necessarily something that they would look at the 1st of August and go, well, we can't do that. So it goes back to my original question to you. Do you truly believe that maybe the organizational stuff that was going on the end of last week has a lot to do with this from the standpoint of union type situation that would hold people accountable, hold institutions accountable if in fact there is an outbreak? I mean, do you think that's what we're looking at?
Well, I think that is their greatest fear, because they're under assault on several different fronts, and I'm not sure that they know how to respond accurately to them. Namely, being one that's been going on for 100 years, which is their insistence on amateurism. They already know that they're going to have to back down in some form or fashion with name, image, and likeness. The thing that used to be this, massive earthquake that we were all talking about coming to college football as a disruption, which it pales in comparison to schools being panicked over that happening on one hand and being worried about a lifetime of liability for COVID-19, lasting permanent damage to cardiovascular systems. And, they have, it took this pandemic. I mean, they combined into this massive, massive thing now because the players have realized their power at the same time with the social media protests, or as the Black Lives Matter protests, but they're also their social media voices. And these concerns over here about other issues and, the NCAA and schools really trying to pretend like they don't need college football to happen when deep down we all know they do. They've been trying to keep the power out of the hands of the players for so long. It took this situation for the players to really understand and harness it. They're not the first ones to ever speak out about it. And you think about how quaint the O'Bannon case really seems in hindsight, to all this that's going on now. But I think that these people are terrified that the gravy train they've ridden for so long is coming to an end. And I don't usually like to traffic in this sort of speculation, or it almost sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it doesn't make sense that just purely this new risk of COVID-19 is enough for them to shut down college football. Because if that's true, for 125 years, they have looked the other way at the risk of concussions, paralyzation, the long-time fear that someday a player may just die on the field again, Why was it okay for that risk and not this one? That's why in my mind, it feels like I'm putting on a tinfoil hat to talk about this stuff, but it just does. The pieces just don't add up to me.
Yeah, it's just really convenient and really interesting, though, how from a convenient standpoint, the organizers, there are people who are working behind the scenes to make these quote unquote union, end quote. I said quote 3 times there, but you know where I'm coming from. Make these unions come to fruition, have seized upon this opportunity when in fact, especially the share the revenue kind of situation, when in fact colleges may reap the smallest amount of revenue that they've done since Prohibition. No, I'm just joking. But since the 50s, you know what I mean? Seriously. I mean, it's crazy. But once you get your foot in the door, I think the idea is get your foot in the door now when it's convenient, when everybody's paying attention, and you can people are looking for news to write about. Number one, number two, it's what's clear is you can't watch. Nobody shows up at a college football game and just watches the field. They want to see players playing, and so now you got all these forces. Can you imagine, seriously, though? Can you imagine being Gene Smith right now, or some of these athletic directors who have been, Gene Smith's been trying to get student athletes as much as he can for them under the rules. He always likes to play. He wants to be a member in good standing of whatever organization they're in, NCAA, Big Ten. But the flip side of it, he has been fighting for so many things for players. Like for example, the helping the players' families get to go to the national championship game, which was an extra game. It was an extra bowl game that was going to hurt them back in 2014. That was huge, and just little things like that. But now all of a sudden you're getting hit from 4 or 5 sides with all kinds of things. It's got to be crazy, right?
Yeah, and that's we've talked about this so many times, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of challenges to playing these games, and now the snowball has finally got to the bottom of the mountain. It's been building for years, and COVID-19 I think is the last straw to that. In some ways, it may have needed to break the back of the NCAA system, because we love college football here. That goes without saying. You and I have devoted our lives to covering it.
Yeah.
We absolutely love it, and to not have it would be extremely painful. We don't want it. We're not even going to get into the trolls that say that college football reporters are pulling against it happening. But you and I, as close as we've been to it, we know that there are flaws in the way that they play it and the way that the athletes are treated. Ohio State has it better than basically anywhere else. Gene Smith is a huge part of that. And I'm not talking about them specifically, but across college football, there's so much room to improve it. And it's not a level playing field for everybody, and it never will be. And maybe this is the change that gets new conferences, power conferences, but
I just was intrigued by how some national writer said the Mid-American Conference pulling the plug was what started this thing rolling downhill. And I'm just going, ladies and gentlemen, with all due respect to the Mid-American Conference, which I have enjoyed covering way back when and stuff, we're talking apples and oranges. I mean, we're talking about money that comes from the general fund or from the student activity fees in terms of running a program in the Mid-American Conference compared to the major schools out there, the Power Fives, many of whom generate their own revenue. Most of whom I think generate most of their own revenue from their football rights, et cetera, and some basketball. It's a total different can of worms we're talking about there. So that's not what did it. I mean, there is some understanding of the fear of this COVID-19, which is still, like I said, it could creep in through the back door and you don't even know it's there until it's, but then if that happens, you shut down your team, right? I mean, you shut down. If you get 8 or 10 guys like the Marlins did in baseball, you shut down your team until you get things under control. And so that's why I do believe, like you just pointed out, a lot of things have come to bear all at the same time that have led us to this moment to where there might be very well could be a fall without college football. But, I'm still waiting to hear from the SEC because Greg Sankey said, patience is the key word. Patience has always been the key word there. I thought the Big Ten was practicing that about as well as anybody, you put out a penciled in schedule, but it's got all these spring loaded where you can move it around and stuff. But then all of a sudden, 5 days later, Armageddon. Are you kidding?
Well, not only that, when they released the schedule, they also had thoroughly detailed plans for how they were going to manage COVID-19 with testing and how much testing, when you test, how self-quarantining, contact tracing, the 14 days, which I thought was the thing that would end the season with rosters being all shut down just because of contact tracing and the opportunity that you wouldn't be able to test out of that with multiple negative tests. Like, that was my biggest question about what would happen with the season. But the point is, they laid out all the protocol. They put out a schedule, and it had the protocol. And they haven't even had a chance to test whether the protocol works.
Well, that's what Ryan Day's big beef was this week, was that, wait a minute, you haven't even tested what you said you were going to have as your protocols. You haven't even gotten down that road yet. And right now, I think Northwestern's had some big problems, the way I understand it, with its athletic department, meaning athletes, et cetera, who've come back. That's why, that was a scuttlebutt as we record this today. We know what Rutgers' problems were or are. Maryland probably is facing similar jeopardy, et cetera. We know Michigan State, from the standpoint of testing, doesn't get their results back anywhere near what Ohio State does. Ohio State is equipped to test twice a week right now, taking a test at 9 o'clock in the morning and having it available to you results by at least 7:30 or 8 the next morning. Everybody doesn't have that capability, but the point that was made in that protocol situation was they were going to go to a third-party organization which was going to handle testing 2 times a week, especially during the season. I don't think they've even lined that party up yet, the way I understand. I think it went out for bid, but so like you said, it was set up. That's why, when you talked a while ago about you don't see Ohio State playing any games if, in fact, the Big Ten pulls the plug, as adamant as Ryan Day was about looking into that, if, in fact, the Big Ten pulls the plug, I think it's very interesting because there's a big difference right now from as we are recording this, no plug has been pulled yet as we record this. But if all of a sudden 5 plugs are pulled, as going back to what Urban Meyer said on my podcast many, many weeks ago, could be survival of the fittest from the standpoint of, well, you know what? We've taken care of our business. We're willing to play schools that have taken care of their business, et cetera, and come up. I mean, I can see it happening. I can also see it not happening, but I can see it happening because there would be networks. There are contracts, but if there are no games, if you can't fulfill that contract with the games that are proposed to be in that contract, those contracts kind of fall to the wayside. And there will be networks looking for inventory. That is for sure.
I think we'd have to, I am not the expert in that department, but it's the force majeure that I think we would have to be looking into there because, the SEC, for example, was using that to get their money out of contracts with their non-conference opponents. Would that apply to Ohio State and their, grant of rights, broadcast deals with the Big Ten, everything else that's entwined with being a member of a conference? I honestly don't know the answer. Everybody that I had asked about it before when it became such a popular question, hey, could they play it in another conference this year? Everybody told me no, that it was not something that they could work through. But maybe if the Big Ten is not playing, maybe.
But I'm not talking about playing in another conference. I'm talking about playing teams from other conferences. Yeah, right. There's a big difference in my book there. This would be a Notre Dame free for all. You know what I mean? I mean, total independent. Play who you can play. Suddenly work up. Ohio State, Clemson, 8th game of the year. You know what I mean? I mean, you believe me, there are networks that would line up to try to broadcast that game if, in fact, the overall conferences decide not to play. Now, the problem would be obvious. Who would be officiating those games? They're tied in with the leagues, et cetera. So, yes, there would be all kinds. But in this year, Boston, I'm not putting anything out of the realm of possibility. I'm just telling you.
That's totally fair. And look, I mean, we're also talking about, if we're going to play in this sandbox, Nebraska wants to play, Iowa wants to play. Jim Harbaugh spoke out and posted his statement on Monday. James Franklin did the same thing.
That's 5.
You could realistically pull that off as a quasi-independent, just with parts of the Big Ten that believes that it is able to play. It's like I'd much rather be thinking about that. And also, Ohio State could maybe play a better schedule if they were picking and choosing, a game against Notre Dame and Clemson as the bonus ones. I mean, you'd be looking at – imagine that broadcast deal. If Ohio State was allowed to go out on its own,
Oh yeah,
and protected them own, like Texas was able to cash in a while ago on the Longhorn Network. If you had a 1-year opportunity where Ohio State got to build a schedule like that and sell it,
yeah.
well, you're paying off. You're paying for every school or every athletic team on your school that year and for years to come, because that would be an absolutely massive broadcast deal.
A bowl game every week, ladies and gentlemen. Well, testing in mind. Well, anyway, that was a long-winded podcast there, but I think we touched on a lot of good points. I really enjoyed having Rex Kern on with me. I appreciated Dr. Corey Teague, the father of the Master Blaster, Master Teague III, for coming on and doing video that you can also find on YouTube on the LettermenRow.com channel, LettermenRow.com YouTube channel. That's easy for me to say 3 times. But and of course, I always appreciate Boston Ward coming on with me. Boston, stay in semi-quarantine, man, and we'll see how everything flies. I mean, by this time next week, there's a good chance the picture could be a lot clearer, but there's a good chance we could be looking into a pond full of mud again as this thing goes along. Agreed?
I would love some resolution on this. It's all of it is really hard to really you just catch yourself. You're in the middle of these conversations and you go 10 different tangents. I mean this when I say this, not specifically about Gene Smith. Like, all these presidents and all these administrators have a very difficult job.
Yes.
Right now, harder than it has ever been or ever will be again, probably. And to make a decision to postpone, cancel, play, like, none of it is easy for them. And I get it. I'm glad that they're doing it and not me. I try my best to keep an open mind with what they're going to do with any decision they make. They've got a lot more information at their hands than I do, but man, it's that option, that nuclear option. I don't know why they were racing to get there.
But you know what? If you can open the school somewhat, like Ohio State, I think is still planning to do, in some form or fashion. If you can, the Ohio Union opened this week, reopened, they said, I'm sure there are social distancing rules involved, et cetera. If you can reopen school, you got to figure you could play football, is all I'm saying, based on the quarantine situation the football team has put itself in all of these major schools. And so we'll see when we're back here next week, ladies and gentlemen, we will see what the lay of the land looks like. But for Boston Ward, this is Tim May. Thanks again for watching the Tim May podcast.